Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. I'm Karyn Arnold here with Kelly Daugherty, and this is our second official episode where we're going to be, officially diving into our GRIEF format and what all of that actually means. Just a quick recap. Our last episode was a little bit more detail about myself and Kelly and telling you a little bit about our background, some of our philosophies. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to that yet, it's a good place to start just to kind of get some groundwork for us here. But today, and what we'll be doing going forward, is taking a deeper dive into the individual parts of the grief. So what we're going to talk about today, well, I should say, let me stop a second, is that GRIEF and what that stands for. The G is for grounding, R is for rebuilding, I for interacting, E for evolving, and F for finding. We're going to explain so much more about this as we go, but we're building all of this on the idea that these are the steps that we need to go through and to be helping ourselves and trying to make it really actionable as we are finding tangible tools. And one thing that we talked about, Kelly, I think, is this culture of progress that we are looking. Do you want to just expand on that a second, what that means?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is we want to show that there is things that you can do to help you, right? And small little steps can help build momentum. It doesn't have to be huge things, right? And it's about consistency and repetition, right? There's a lot of like brain science about neuroplasticity and all of that, which I won't go into and bore you guys about, but that's, I'm a bit of a brain geek with that. So, but we also know progress isn't always linear. Grief isn't neat. It's not orderly. It's not these steps to go through or stages to go through. Grief is a bit of a hot mess. It's forwards and backwards and all over. So your progress may feel the same way as well when you're grieving, right? You may feel like you're doing great, and then boom, something comes up, an anniversary or an event, and you kind of feel like you've taken a few steps back. But really, that awareness is so important. And really what we're going to talk a lot about is just being aware. Karyn and I were just talking about this the other day off camera about really awareness is the first step. You know, when we talk about different things, well, like I always talk about mindfulness. And when we're starting to engage in practicing mindfulness, the first step is really to start being aware of how mindless you actually are most of the time, right? So it's that awareness.
Yeah.
And we also really want you to highlight and celebrate your little victories, you know, in self-care. And the fact that you got out of bed today, you know, celebrate that. Or that you did go to the gym or you went for a walk or whatever that is. It is important to also celebrate those. I have a friend that actually texted me today, and she took a day off from work and she's organizing her closet. And she's like, I know that's not really self-care. And I'm like, no, it absolutely is self-care, because you know what? If your closet's organized, you're going to feel a little more balanced and settled, right? So yes, so celebrate that. Be proud of yourself that you were able to do that for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just speaks to what we are trying to put out there to be supporting grieving people. You know, there are a lot of different formats for grief stories and for people to be, you know, talking and sharing. And there's definitely a need for that. But I think where we're looking to take it in a different direction is to really focus again on the actionable steps and to have that kind of culture of progress where together that's where we're focused on how we are progressing forward. I think that's really important. So I want to talk a little bit about grounding in grief and what that really means. I mean, I know a lot of times when I'm talking to people, I also refer to it as the basics. And when I'm just getting to know a person, it's one of the questions that I ask them. How are you eating? How are you sleeping? You know, what's your level of activity been like? We know that people really struggle with motivation, with energy. Sleep really becomes an issue. Eating just doesn't seem necessarily to be as important or a priority. We'll talk about that a little bit today, but it's the foundations of our health in a lot of ways is these things. And because we know that grieving is so exhausting, And as I always say to people, it takes so much of your energy, and energy is not bottomless. It's limited, really limited, especially at a time like this. So we also have to be kind of looking for sources of energy, and they are in places and things that we're doing every day. If we're eating, if we're sleeping, what are the things that we could do to maximize those habits to make them a little bit better and work for us in our grief. So that's really what we're talking about. It's not dieting, it's not the kind of traditional talk about these things, but instead, how does it help us through grieving? Because I think a lot of times our healthy habits are sort of cast aside because it just feels like it's not a priority because our why and our motivation, has changed. So, there is a real physical reality to grief that we need to be aware of and the impact that it has on how we feel. People often describe physical symptoms of grief besides the emotional ones. So, also trying to tend to our physical selves through this. Also, remembering too that if you were a caregiver, there's probably a lot of this that has been cast aside and hasn't been focused on. So, again, we'll be getting into this more and more as we go through this. But I think today we just want to really kind of give a nice overview of what G grounding looks like in the grief and action plan. So Kelly, you want to start us off maybe with the eating and some of the important things to know about that?
Yeah, and I just want to just piggyback on what you said, and just for all of our listeners to understand, today we're talking about G. Next session, our next podcast will be talking about R, and then we're going to go through each letter each week. So when we start having guests on after we get through the first 6 episodes, we're going to start inviting guests on to be able to talk about these different things. So in the future, we're probably going to have somebody coming on and talking a little bit more about nutrition and sleep and all sorts of things. So if there is somebody that you would like to learn more about or hear about as far as one of these categories, please reach out to us and we'll try to make sure we can get an expert in that area. So these first 6 episodes are really just an overview of our framework and helping you understand what our podcast is going to be made up of. So, right, we're going to be talking about eating and nutrition. And as Karyn said, this isn't about dieting, this isn't about anything. We know everybody when we're sad, some of us like to stuff our faces like I do, and some of us don't have an appetite at all. And I found I'm gluten free. I've been gluten free for years. And after my dad died, all I wanted was gluten. And my gastro said to me, he said, "You're going down a slippery slope, Kelly." and, and so I'm back to being gluten free, but, and trying to maybe lose some of the weight that I gained from eating all that gluten. But, this is what we do. We're emotional eaters for a lot of us, right? We always use the word comfort food when we talk about food. Comfort food usually makes us feel uncomfortable. So, um, but unfortunately, when we're grieving, it's sometimes the best we can do is just to eat what we can and understanding and being compassionate with yourself. Like, you know what, I didn't do so well today. Well, just that awareness is key. We also, if somebody's been a caregiver, you may have been, like Karyn said, put yourself on the back burner. So you may have been eating a lot of fast food, or if you were in the hospital, eating at cafeteria. I know I loved the chocolate pudding in the hospital. And I ate a lot of that at every meal. So, maybe trying to get back into some normal, healthy routines for your eating and what you used to do before. But it's also important to sometimes, you know what, if you want to treat yourself, you want to have ice cream, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up too much. We just want to make sure that you are actually getting some nutrition in your body. It is important. We know when we don't eat, it actually causes you can increase the brain fog that we're already experiencing as we're grieving. It might cause some additional anxiety, it could cause some more stomach issues and things like that. So that's why we do talk about this, because it is important. We want to make sure that you're getting some nutrition in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I like to talk about with the basics and with the grounding is, these are some of the things that we can still control. I think when you've had a significant loss in your life, it often feels like you've lost control of everything. And it's understandable. It feels like all your choices and decisions have been taken away from you. And I think in grief, you're feeling just kind of swept along by life. And so, what I try to remind people, because sometimes it's not that exciting to be eating healthy and to be making healthy choices. And you just maybe don't feel super motivated to be doing that. But I think if we set our intention a little bit differently, if we think of it in terms of, hey, this is actually something that I get to have a say in. Of all of the things that I can't control, this is one of the few things I can. What I'm eating, what I'm putting into my body, how I'm nourishing myself, even looking at it that way, in terms of tending to ourselves and caring for ourselves. So, yeah, it's important. It really is. Well, another part of this, of course, is sleeping and getting some rest. And we know that our sleep is often disrupted by grieving. A lot of people have a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep. It can be for all kinds of different reasons. Sometimes it's a matter of having lost a person that you shared sleeping space with or a nighttime routine with. Oftentimes, it is sort of those menacing thoughts that continue, or just our inability to kind of shut down our brain at night. It's that weird paradox, and there's so many of them. We'll probably be talking about paradoxes a lot throughout this because there's just a ton. But, you've probably never been more exhausted and less able to sleep. And it's so frustrating. And people are eager to sleep. Now, some people, I do talk to a few that find they're sleeping too much, that the sleep kind of offers this escape. And so that they try to go to bed as early as they can, stay in bed or sleep as long as they can, just so that they don't have to be aware and awake and thinking of what's going on. It can also be difficult to go to sleep at night knowing that each morning you wake up with that fresh realization, of the reality of what's happened. In the early days, that is very disruptive to people, and a really difficult day to be starting your day can feel like you're just reliving it, all over again. So there, quite a few things that I think people try to do to help themselves through this. And this is where some of those experts you talked about, Kelly, could be really helpful. I think some of us are familiar with the idea. And I do know that some of the people I talk to get a little frustrated by this because everybody wants to sleep good. And unlike the eating where I can meal prep, I can food shop, like I have a little bit more choices with that. Sleeping does not feel like a choice. Everybody wants to sleep well, and I think sometimes it almost feels like going to a slot machine and you pull the lever, either you got a good night's sleep or you didn't, like it's all luck. So I think we are going to try and challenge that a little bit because there are things that you can do. And that's something we will definitely be exploring more. Are what are some of the things that, again, we can control, that we can be putting into our nighttime routine to make sleep come more easily?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can't wait till there's some certain, I already have some people that I'm interested in having on, just different sleep experts with different techniques that are actually really proven to be quite beneficial. And
Yeah.
sometimes it also comes down to getting back to the basics and creating a good sleep hygiene routine, right? Being free. I have had a lot of clients where they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't sleep. So then they start scrolling on Facebook and, or some other social media device, and all those lovely memories pop up,
Mm,
right? And
yeah.
then they're hit with that grief burst. And so making sure you're not picking up the phone in the middle of the night, that maybe even put it in a separate room so you're not tempted, and, not maybe keeping the TV on all night. There's things that actually can help, and some small things. And even with all those wonderful things in place, sometimes you might not have a great night's sleep.
Yeah.
And
You do have to make that choice. I have a quick example of that recently. Before bed, I was just cleaning out my voicemails, and I was just kind of scrolling through, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I haven't done this a while." And I started to get a little further back, and I looked at the date, and I looked at the number, and I was like, "Wait a minute, I think this may be a voicemail from my stepdad who's been gone for 6 years." And it was so tempting, that pull, like, where I would love to hear his voice, but I was sitting in bed, like, this is one of the last things I was doing. Why I was doing this, I don't know, right before sleep, but I was. And it was just a normal activity up to that point, but then as soon as I saw it was about, it could be his voice, I was like, I'm not even gonna chance it. I need to sleep. I don't need this right now. I have to make the decision not to listen to this, because I'll tell you that grief stuff sometimes, I always say to people, are you chasing grief or is it chasing you? And sometimes it's like you chase it and you don't even mean to, but
Right.
doing it right before bed is not going to be great.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, our next part of this, in some of the basics, would be movement. And we call
Mhm.
it that instead of exercise. Maybe you can help explain why, Kelly, that is such an important distinction when we're grieving.
Well, so we just need to move our bodies. It's so important. So, grief is so physical. As we've already mentioned, people will have headaches and stomach aches and joint pain. And what we know from some research on the body, we know that our inflammation numbers are higher than any other time, when we're grieving, which makes us more susceptible to illness. People, you may feel like I felt like I got a cold several times this winter, and usually I'm pretty good with not getting it. But I think, being new in grief again, it was showing up and with that inflammation. And so being able to move our body, there's so much research on movement, right? 20 minutes of walking is better than an antidepressant. There's that study has been proven over and over again. And so our bodies also feel so heavy. Sometimes we feel disconnected, right? We don't even know what we're feeling in our bodies, right? We're just so focused on the grief. And so being able to do little things to ground you back into your body, right? Noticing what you feel in your body, um even just doing some like nice yoga stretches, something like that. Movement doesn't necessarily mean going out and training for a 5K. It could just be some simple, even chair yoga, just gentle stretching, things like that. Being outside in nature is so important. So I have a program called Healing Strides, and the first hour is a traditional grief group, and the second hour we train for a 5K race, and at the end of the 7 weeks we all run a 5K together. And I've been offering this for years, and it's research based now and extremely effective. But what I hear from the participants is having that goal of that 5K is really beneficial to them, right? But also being out there and being out in nature, being mindful, feeling your feet hit the pavement, being aware of what's around you, listening to the birds, being able to talk with your group, you know, um, member with you. There's so many benefits to these. And I always joke around and say we are going to get you through that finish line even if you have to crawl. But because it doesn't have to be this fast 5K, right? It's just about moving. It's just the benefits are so important, and it's just I can't say it enough, but it really does help us feel a little bit better. And you can also be proud of yourself then, like, oh, think about the endorphins that are released after a good walk or a good run or getting on a bicycle or something like that. You do feel a little bit better. So when we're grieving, even just those moments that we feel slightly better can be so helpful and beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like I say to people, sometimes just getting outside if you can, not all climates allow for that all year long, but even just a little bit of sunshine, a little bit of air. I actually, a lot of times, well, we're in the summer right now, this time of year, I will walk more like dusk or nighttime, um, because it's just a little bit cooler and kind of
Yeah.
pretty. And, that can also help. But I think it's the idea of nature. I love walking around my neighborhood with the smells, different, even when it's cold out and you can smell people's fireplaces. And, there's all kinds of things that can help. And maybe also it helps get you away from things like your phone and, the tasks. A lot of grieving people have a lot to do and have a lot of things surrounding them. So it is kind of removing you from some of that too. Um, there's also, I mean, the idea of joining exercise groups and getting to, meet with other people. But again, the focus is not on weight loss, fitting into your jeans, it's not what we're really wanting to emphasize here, I think, is how the motivation is different and what's really important. Because I think people could be resistant to the idea. I think a lot of times when you are grieving, you're already feeling deprived of things. So we feel like I want to eat my favorite foods. I want to be able to relax and take it easy. And you can do those things. But we are kind of looking at what your intention is. And again, knowing that a little bit of movement is going to help you probably sleep better at night. How all these things are connected. That's what's so important about the grounding and about the basics, is that they're all intertwined. That's really important. So, Kelly, I know one thing we had talked about with our podcast each week is the idea of setting up some goals. Since we are action focused, what could that look like this week?
Yeah, so we're focusing on the grounding. So we would encourage you first that awareness, right? Start being aware of your sleep habits, maybe how much you're moving, what you're eating. I really was thinking a lot about as you were talking, like just thinking about widows. And only cooking for one and how different that is. And so then some people just eat cereal, right? So there's these things. So just being aware. We want you to just notice your habits, your routines, your patterns, okay? Without judgment. Don't beat yourself up. We want to make sure you're practicing some self-compassion, being kind to yourself and knowing that you're doing the best you can. And maybe track it. Track it for only 3 days, right? So you could do it on your phone in the notes section. You can get a little journal. You could do there's tons of apps to track different things and just notice. What time did I eat? What did I eat? And how did I feel after eating it? Oh, I had a bad stomach ache after that, or I felt better, or I had a little bit more energy. What did it look like? And then how was your sleep? Did something get in the way? Was something helpful? Did you feel like you slept great but still woke up exhausted, which is totally normal when you're grieving? Just be aware. And then how did your body feel? Did you have any aches and pains? Were you able to move your body? And when you did move your body, how did that feel? Don't overdo it too. Like, don't feel like you have to go out there and do something right. Like small steps, right? Small, as we said in the first episode, sometimes a little bit of a detour or a pivot can be a huge change and can get us on it somewhere totally different down the road. But sometimes we have to start out small. So, really being compassionate to yourself, not beating yourself up if you don't, move your body. So take 3 days maybe and just journal and notice what's happening with your food, your sleep, and your movement.
Yeah. I love the idea of observation, and that's something that I try to do for myself. It's almost like take a step outside of yourself and just you're observing yourself. It's not even just your habits. You're kind of watching yourself in a way and seeing how you respond to things. What are your go-tos? These are habits, like a lot of things are. And we develop habits kind of quickly in grief where we are shifting the things that we maybe used to do or prioritize. Again, so we're not labeling, judging, we're not being critical. We really want to try to move away from that. I think sometimes it can just be like interesting, like, huh, oh wow, that was my response to that. Or that, I just went as soon as I had that bad phone call, I went right into, the cupboard and got a whole thing of cookies or something. I didn't even know I was doing that kind of stuff. So just those kinds of things that we're just observing and just having that awareness of. So, okay, well, next time we're going to be talking about R, which is rebuilding. That's going to talk a little bit about our day to day, our structure and routine. I will always say I don't think we ever recognize just how important that is, but it's probably more important for grieving people than anybody. So we are going to talk about that, how to create some supportive routines. And as you said, Kelly, if there's anybody that you'd like to hear from, as far as an expert in any of the areas that we talk about or specific topics within each of these steps here, we certainly would like to hear from you. So, in the meantime, remember to keep tuning in, subscribe, tell people about it, share it in any platform that you have available. We want to get the word out to as many people as we can here. So, thank you everybody for being here today. Kelly, thank you for everything. And we will look forward to seeing you
Thank you.
next time.
Thanks for joining us on the Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.